Thank you for Patreon now for donating to the Patreon.
Hey guys, it's Vandy. So back on Card Fight Vanguard deck profiles. So you guys enjoyed them, like, constant subscribe, and social hobby. This time we're covering set 13, Leonor Trio. So, some of you may be wondering, what's Leonor Trio? Is Leonor Trio some type of new Leonor on top of Vivace/Vivace that was released in set 13? No, it is not. Instead, Leonor Trio is what I choose to call the deck where I run all the Leonors that is not the trial deck one. Basically, Grand March of Full Bloom, Masquez, and of course, Vivace/Vivace. So, yeah, you would think this deck doesn't work consistently. Believe it or not, this deck actually gets more numbers on average than the deck that's actually focused on Vivace does, which doesn't make sense, but whatever. So let's go ahead and get this deck started, shall we? And you can see what we got here, because honestly, this deck's really fun to play. First up, we have our starter announcing window spring quality fee. Grade 0 boost, 5k shield, 6k base. Auto mode opponent win second, draw a card. Standard starter free draw if you win second. You can really make this any starter you want because none of the ride line really requires core fee. But when we're going like pretty much as full theme of Leonor as physically possible within reason, most reason, you kind of want to go for as much theme as possible. So, you know, core fee is the nice starter. But again, core fee is not required. You can really make this any starter you want. Then we have our triggers. First, we run over trigger in Source Dragon Deity of Blessed Favor. Grade 0 boost, 50k shield, 5k power. Over trigger and over trigger in your deck. We're going to reveal it as a trigger move that card, draw a card, choose one of your units. It gets plus one mana for the turn. And if you reveal it during draw check, activate its additional effect, which you get to draw a card, choose one of your units. It gets plus one for the turn. All everyone gets plus 10. And then if you're damaged, the same number of cards of your opponents or more, choose a card from your damage zone to heal it. All around pretty solid because basically no matter when you pull this, whether it's offensively or defensively, you guaranteedly get a mill and a draw. And then if you pull it defensively, you get a total of 2 draws. Someone's getting a mill, someone's getting a crit, either the Vanguard or if the Vanguard got PG'd, so the thing that you gave the million to. The front row is getting a 10k on top of this, so if your opponent didn't PG the Vanguard and you didn't put the 1 million on it, or maybe because you didn't have to, automatically that's going through. And then you possibly even get a heal out of it too. In fact, the only thing that's not guaranteed technically is the 10k and a crit, regardless if you check it offensively or defensively. All around, Blessed Favor is just an amazing over. I love Blessed Favor. It's my favorite because it's literally an everything bagel. The second you pull it, it gets off everything. It doesn't auto win you the game, but it makes it a lot harder to beat you. And that's why I love Blessed Favor. You can run Volna or Sporia for multi-attack or consistency respectively. But yeah, no, Blessed Favor for me is just a flex, so I love Blessed Favor. And then move on to our normal triggers. First, we're on 2 copies of both a draw and a front trigger, Frenzied Harris and Serene Maiden Lena, respectively. Both are grade 0's boost and 4k power, but the difference lies in their shield and their trigger effect, obviously. So Lena's the draw trigger with 5k shield, and Frenzied Harris is the front trigger with 15k shield. But they both share the same skill, which is a continuous guard circle skill. If your opponent's Vanguard's a grade 3 or greater, they both get plus 5k shield. So I'm pretty solid because when we get into the late game, any extra shields you can get, especially because in this deck you want to rush in the early game, or at least the way I play, you want to rush in the early game. You definitely want to have as many extra shield as possible. And the reason why it goes rainbow with this is on the simple factors. I was going to put more draws in, but when I first played Leonor and I had draws more, well, no fronts and more draws, I constantly got close to decking out, and while I never decked out except for one time, that was more me being stupid than anything else, I don't want to like take those chances because those are really close calls. And then as for the fronts, well, I just never drew into my key pieces, and then I just shoved them both in at 2 copies, and whoop-de-doo, it fixes both problems somehow. So yeah, 2 of both. You know, we get extra numbers to front row, and when you're running Masquez, you can restand the front row. You are going to want possible extra numbers to board, and then when it comes to Lena, increase hand cards. So that's what it is. And we have obviously 7 crits, 3 copies of Melodino Performia, grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 5k power, 4 copies of Spider-Man Alana. So Melodino Performia can be really any crit, but I will recommend Alana out of 4 just because she's a grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 4k power, who at the end of the battle that she boosted on auto rear, you can put her to soul to choose one of your units against plus 2k for the turn. The 2k does nothing. There is never a time where the 2k will do something in this deck because your numbers already hit the magic number and is not going to make a difference. Like it'll barely hit under a magic number because of this, or it'll barely like, you know, put it to a magic, like it would ever put it to a magic number, just increase the power past a magic number. But being able to get soul is very important because if you are stuck on Grand March for whatever reason, you're definitely going to want this to help increase the soul, so it's nice for that. So 7 crit, you know, for crit pressure, and when you have 2 Vanguards that technically have triple drive, and then you have one that can restand stuff in the front row, yeah, it's kind of really good. So 7 crits, and then the 2 random ones. Then we have our 4 heals and flowery tones, I like to call it LG Pixie, grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 5k power. Yes, I'm aware LG Pixie is the heal for Zorga. For those of you that are not in on the story yet, or you haven't seen yesterday's video, pretty much when I first put Flowery Tone into tabletop, I forgot to change its name from LG Pixie because I was copying over Zorga's deck, and for the longest time, I left it as LG Pixie, and I didn't realize it until I was like changing the cards to English, and I was like, They either really changed its name, which they never do, or at least they never change it that much, or I am an idiot. And then I looked at the Zorga card and I was like, I'm an idiot, because that's Zorga's heal. So, yeah, for a Flowery Tone, I don't really like the effect heals too much. I feel like they're too situational, being a constant 10k shield and only in very specific situations being a 25k shield. I'd much rather have a consistent 15k over a fluctuating 10 to 25. But run the effect heals if you want to, and run any heal in that matter over this, but I just prefer Flowery Tone because, again, it fits the theme. Then we move on to our grade 1s. Run 2 copies of Rhythm of Joy, Atlantis, grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base. I keep feeling like I'm saying Atlantis and not Elantis, but anyways. Continues rear guard during your turn. If you have Vanguard Leader card in this card name, she gets plus 2k power. And if your Vanguard's in the Unison Dress state, she gets plus 5k on top of that. So, or not on top of that, instead of that. So, basically, the second you hit grade 3, regardless of which of the 3 Leonor draw on, she's at least a 10k base. So that's nice to have. And then, again, she works early for early game rush for as an AK. And then, obviously, once you get to Unison Dress state, if you're going into Leonor, Vivace, or Vivace, she'll be a 15k, which is nice to have. It's not amazing for numbers, but it's not horrible either. And then auto rear guard at the end of your turn. If your Vanguard was boosted a total of 3 or more times this turn, be on any of those Leonorns, and that'll proc off, and as long as your opponent doesn't board nuke you. To retire this unit, to draw a card, and if your damage has no face of cards, countercharge 1. I've heard a lot of people say they don't like this because it doesn't, auto countercharge. You have to have no face of damage, but, I mean, to be fair, whether we're talking about this version of the deck or the one I posted yesterday, they both, do the same thing. It doesn't really make a difference in terms of CB. If you get pressured to that point, so be it. But, I mean, this deck has more CB users than that one, and this deck seems to work fine. So, yeah, 2 of Atlantis is not bad with the countercharge skill, and being able to draw and replace yourself is really good, especially if you know your opponent's going to board nuke you. And again, being a 10k booster on, or swinger, on any of the 3 Leonors is great, and possibly 15k once you hit Vivace or Vivace. So, nice 2 of. She's not the most versatile, because again, she requires Vivace for the full effect, but she's also very useful for, resource management, so 2 of. Then we move on to my favorite grade 1 of all time in this deck, and I will never scrap her as long as I live, and that is 4 copies of Marching Debut Perette. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, continues rear guard during your turn. If you have 3 or more grade 1 less rear guard, she was 5k power. I love calling this down in the early game. If any of you have seen my Leonor gameplays, regardless of what matches, regardless of what deck variant it is, all of them have Perette at least a 3 of, if not a 4 of. I'm pretty sure all of them have it as a 4 of, but just in case, I'm covering my bases. And most of the time, I just openly call 2 to 3 of them in the early game just because I can, because I love early game rush, and having a 13k beat stick that I can abuse, yeah, that's pretty fun to use. For Perette, just very solid grade 1, and it's also one of those cards where you don't have to worry about wasting the full skill of, because I know, at least for me personally, if I'm playing down a card that I can't use the full skill of, I hate it, because I also feel like if the game gets longer and that card would have been useful in that later situation, I'm going to hate myself knowing I wasted it now. So with a card that only has 1 ability that acts as a beat stick, it's pretty nice to have for Perette. Very solid grade 1, good for early game rush, and she is decent all around for Leonor's, boosting mechanic. 4 of. Then we have 4 copies of the reason why Perette I like more than Diantha, and that is Performing Battle Diantha. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base. So I'm going to read her second skill first. Continues rear guard circle during your turn. If you have 2 or more back row grade 1 or less rear guard, she gives 5k power. So that does include herself, so it'll be at 13k, which is nice to have, but then this ability that I'm about to read is the reason why I actually like Perette more than her, and that is because if you miss the timing of this ability or you don't use it and it comes back to bite you in the ass later, well, you're going to wish you had used a Perette in that situation instead. Anyways, auto placed on rear guard circle from the hand if your Vanguard's a grade 3 or greater. Doesn't matter what it is, just a grade 3 or greater. Counter boss 1 and 2 is a grade 3 or less from your drop zone called to rear guard circle. So, on any Leonor, get any rear guard. Which is great, because that helps you, recycle your rear guards if you got board nuked, especially if you're trying to, do, board boost with Vivace or something like that. So, all around very solid, but I hate Diantha because there have been games where, there was one specifically that I can't remember off the top of my head, where I could have played a Diantha to go for an early game rush that I knew, because I could have gone full board rush and everything would have hit unless my opponent saw double triggers. But my issue with this was I'd be wasting Diantha's skill. And it was the only Diantha I had seen that game. Granted, it was, again, at grade 2, but still. And I didn't want to waste my only Diantha in case I needed her later, because I also knew I was playing against the board nuke deck. So I was like, I'm going to keep her. And I still lost that game, but later on in that game, that Diantha came in real handy for making a comeback. So 4 of Diantha, 4 Perette, both of them do a similar thing. Diantha is better for, once we get to grade 3, but a better beat stick because you don't want to call her down in the early game and waste your skill. Now we have 4 copies of Forest Protecting Hunter Prosper, who benefits from Leonor regular, Leonor Masquez, and this thing. So grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base. First up, bias. he has an arrow, meaning I love him more than anything else. Auto when placed on rear guard circle by card ability, doesn't matter if it's Vanguard or rear guard, so Diantha and or any of the two Leonorns that can call by abilities, you may soul charge 1. Not a mandatory soul charge, which is great because that means you lessen the chance of you decking out, but if you want to increase your soul because maybe you use Rectinia skill to call stuff, or maybe you're running low on soul and you're still on Grand March, it's definitely helpful for that. And then auto rear guard, when this unit boosts anything, if you have Vanguard Leonorn's card name, choose one of your units in the same column as it, and it gives a 5k power of the turn. It give it to itself, increasing its power and the unit it's boosting's power. Or if you're on Masquez or Vivace, who stands units, and you're probably not going to stand this, you can give it to the unit in front of it, so when it stands again, it's going to be bigger numbers. So 4 Prosper, all around very solid grade 1. It gets more numbers to your rear guards, and it also allows you to soul charge, so what's talk about it? Easy 4 of. Then we have 4 copies of Custodial Dragon, grade 1 boost, 0 source, K base, can change Sentinel. You have to force Sentinels in deck and also put on guard circle. Choose one of your units, it cannot be hit till in a battle, and if your hand is 2 or more cards, choose a card from your hand, discard it. Standard PG, no special battle basically means if this and only one other card is in your hand when you place it on guard circle, you don't have to discard one, great, because that means you can be aggressive as you want in the early game. Ahem, ahem, cough, cough. Call all the Perettes in your hand and beat the ever-living shit out of your opponent. And then when your opponent counterattacks you after you drop your hand to near 0 and then basically get it back from the triple drive of Leonor, just PG, middle finger them, you know, I survived your counterattack, now it's time for me to continue me beating you to hell. So, 4 of Custodial Dragon. Very solid PG. You can make this Planet Prevent Dragon because they have the same skill, but I prefer Custodial Dragon because it came out close to the time of Leonor's release and, you know, full-on Leonor theme as much as physically possible, so 4 of Custodial Dragon. Then we have our last grade 1 of in the ride deck, none in the main deck, of Budding of Pleasant Sounds, Gracia. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, AK base, auto opponent by Brilliant Tune Rectinia. You may call this card to the rear guard circle. I still remember that I didn't realize I was a main clause. I may have during the Ezra of Annie when this was revealed, but I didn't realize I was a main clause since then until they did it in the anime, and I was like, I feel like Urara cheated, and I hate Urara, so I was like looking at any reason to say that she cheated, and then I saw it, and I was like, huh, you know what, I don't like it, but she's right, it is legal to do that. And then other skills, continues rear guard, during the battle, this unit boosts to Vanguard, it gets with 5k power. So, cool, it's a 13k swing. I really wish they just didn't restrict it to Vanguard, because this card was so close to being such a good beat stick, because, like, you know, now if you call it to the side when you go second, because nothing, or not go second, when you get to grade 2 turn, because nothing's requiring you to call it to back row center, but now if you call it to the side, until you boost with it with Leonard's skill, it's always going to be an 8k booster, which kind of sucks when everything else is pretty much a 13k booster inherently. So, you know, it's not a bad grade 1, but it's an okayish grade 1, and at least can call itself to rear guard. In worst case scenario, if you do want to rush it, that you can. So 1 of Gracia in the ride deck, none in the main deck, because again, it's really only useful boosting the Vanguard. But hey, on the bright side, the Vanguard, when you swing with it on grade 2 turns, a 23k swing, and my typical rule is if the Vanguard's over 20, just take it, because I mean, a 15k drop is now either even or a 1 to pass, and it's not worth it anymore. So 1 of ride deck Gracia. Then we move on to our grade 2s. We're on 2 copies of Draco Tree Wretch Dept Elwith. You see, here's the thing, this card, it's like one of those things that doesn't make sense, where even though there's 2 copies of it, you would believe that there's 4 of them, because it just shows up so consistently. Hell, the match that me and Oolong just did yesterday, that's gonna go up, I think, either tomorrow or 2 days from now, that match that we did with this deck, straight up, wait, where was I going to stop? Oh, yeah. Straight up, he pulled like this every single game, even though technically he shouldn't be able to, but whatever. Anyways, Dept Elf skill, grade 2 and 5k shield, 10k base, all don't placed on the rear guard circle. By counter blasting 1 and soul blasting 1, you can choose any one of your rear guard circles that Draco Tree markers on them, put a Draco Tree marker onto it, and then search your deck for 1, Mask of Hydra Gum, reveal it, put it to hand, shuffle your deck. Cool. It gets Draco Tree markers, which you can use when you're on Masquez to add numbers. It gets you Mask of Hydra Gum search, which you're going to need to get to Masquez easier. All around, it's a very solid card, and if you're wondering if it's possible for this deck to hit 5 markers, it is. Here's what you do. You play this, you play Diantha, and then you just pray to the gods that you have enough CB to keep that roll going. You're not going to do that by any means, because that will definitely cause you a CB problem, but I mean, if you want to just make markers out the wazoo, go ahead. You really only need 2 for the front row, and that's it. But yeah, 2 of Dept Elwith. It just searches cards, it makes markers. What's like about it? Easy 2 of. Then we have our last grade 2, 1 of in the ride deck, none in the main deck, of Brilliant Tune Rectinia. Grade 2 and 5k shield, 10k base, auto reply by unit with Leonor and its card name. Soul Blast 1, choose a grade 1 less from your drop zone, call it to rear guard. Most of the time, at least from my experience, you don't do that. The only times you do is if you're playing a board nuke deck that you know will board nuke you on the next turn. Like, if there's even a chance that they can't fully board nuke you, don't waste that skill, because one soul might make a whole difference. I've learned that in Leonor, but you know, if you are confident that they can board nuke you, and they probably will next turn, then use the skill just to get a grade 1 so you don't waste hand cards. But you know, most of the time it's kind of just a vanilla for that skill, and then the other one is continuous rear guard. If you have a back row with 3 or more rear guards, it gets boost, including herself. So not a bad ability. Worst case scenario, if you have to call her with Diantha because maybe you bricked and you've seen all triggers this game, or a bunch of Leonorns like Oolong did yesterday, then yes, technically speaking, Rectinia's decent because she's at least a 10k booster, meaning she can proc off Leonorn's skill. But yeah, that's really all she's like useful for. I mean, you only do that if you open with all triggers or you open with all grade 3s, and even then you probably still have enough grade 1s or like any generic boosters to actually use Leonor's skills. So one of Rectinia in the ride deck. She's not amazing. She doesn't warrant a rear guard placing, or so we don't run her in the main deck, but I mean, she is recyclable via Diantha, so worst case scenario, you can call her. So one of in the ride deck. Then move on to our grade 3s. Run 2 copies of the thing that is searchable via this thing, and that is Mask of Hedrogum. Grade 3, normal order. Check the top 5 cards of your deck to choose up to one unit with Draco Tree or Masquez's card name from among them, reveal it, add it to your hand, and shuffle your deck. Cool, so either get a Adept, which somehow shows up often from this, or get a Leonorn, and then act Drop Zone if you have a grade 3 Vanguard without Masquez's card name. Reveal a grade 3 with Masquez's card name from your hand, and write the reveal card as this cost for stand. And if you rode, put this card into your soul. If your opponent's Vanguard's a grade 3 grade as well, and you do not Persona Ride yet this turn, Persona Ride. So cool. For Leonor Masquez, that works really well because that deck gets 5 attacks, but on the downside, the rear guards don't get boost, unlike regular Leonorn, who can actually give the rear guards boost and Vivase rear guards boost, and that brings me something I want to talk about when I get to Vivase. If I don't bring it up, someone please, like, or if I don't say, like, this is what I want to talk about, someone please ask me in the comments so I can remember it, because I actually do want to talk about this. But anyways, being able to activate Persona Ride with a 5 attack deck is pretty nice, and the best part is this can work whether on regular Vivase or regular Leonorn, and because how it works, you can go ride regular Vivase on top of regular Leonorn or any of the 2 Leonorns, get that free draw for her skill, then play Mask, shove it to Soul, Persona Ride, so therefore you got 2 draws and your front row got +10 off this. So 2 of Hedrogum, all around, very solid order. It's searchable. You really only need to get 1 out of deck and you're pretty good unless it ends up in damage, and even though as long as you can heal, you're fine. It can search, and not to mention the fact it goes to Soul, which helps manage the Soul problem. So 2 of Mask of Hedrogum. Then we have 4 copies? Oh yeah, I guess she has 4 copies in this deck. Of Servitude of Funeral Procession, Leonor Masquez. Grade 3, Twin Drive, Persona Ride, 13k base. Continuous, she can only be written from a grade 6 Leonor's card name, so herself, or quite literally every Leonor that exists right now. And then act Vanguard once per turn by removing any card with Leonor's different card name from this unit from your hand, soul, or drop zone. So, you know, regular Leonor, aka Grand March, the one from the trial deck, or new Vivece. Choose any grade 1 less card from your drop zone, call it to rear guard, and choose an opponent's rear guard and murder it. Cool, you get a free rear guard murder, and you get any one of these accessible to you in any way, shape, or form. Obviously, you prioritize your grade 1s, and out of those grade 1s you prioritize, okay, if you're running into CB problems, this is what you prioritize. But if you're not running into CB problems, either of these 2, because Diantha pretty much does the same thing, except, you know, these 2 are technically better for numbers. But, I mean, it is what it is. And then Auto Vanguard, when it attacks into anything, choose up to 3 of your back row standing rear guards with boost, and boost this unit with all 3 of them. And if you boosted this unit with 3 or more units, at the end of that battle, counterboss want to choose 2 of your rear guards to stand them. So it can stand back row like Leonorn, but I mean, you really are going to just, like, most of the time stand the front row. And there are occasions where you can just stand a column because you want bigger numbers more than multi-attack, especially if your opponent saw damage triggers that turn. But I mean, typically, especially if you're doing it the Persona Ride turn with this, you're probably going to stand front row for multi-attack. So she gets a lot less power than either the other 2 Leonorns do, but she gets more multi-attack on her own compared to the other ones. Well, that's a lie. Vivase gets more multi-attack by 1 card, but you get the point. 4 of Leonor Masquez, though, all around very solid. Get you rear guards to pump out, so if you're running into rear guard problems, you can handle it with that. And she still gets the boost for free, which is nice to have. And again, she can do multi-attack or make at least a really big column. So 4 of Leonor Masquez, very solid grade 3. Then we have, of course, our main girl herself, Mache Fleur, Leonor Vivase, or Vivece, however the hell you choose to pronounce it. Grade 3, generic Persona, 13k base. Unison Dress, auto in place by riding from a unit with Leonor and its different card name from this unit, or a unit in the Unison Dress state. Draw a card, and this unit becomes in the Unison Dress state till the end of the fight. So, cool, like I said earlier, you can hard ride this on top of any of the other Leonorns, or another copy of this that's already in the Unison Dress state, to get a free draw, and then just use this thing to hard Persona Ride into this thing and get another draw. But, cool, free state. And then auto Auto Vanguard, once per turn, when this unit in the Unison Dress state attacks while not boosted. So the only one that has to attack while not boosted, well, technically all of them have to attack while not boosted for their effects to go off. I think that was like the rule that was proven, like they have to not be boosted for the effect to go off, or like they can, but you know, for the full effect to go off because you have to boost from the entire back row. Anyways, stand all your rear guards and they boost this unit. So let's stop there. Automatically, we go from, you know, not needing boosters to boosting with everything. And if you're wondering, oh, doesn't everything on the board have to have boost though? No, they got you covered with this parentheses text down here. Any rear guard can boost regardless if it has boost or not. So, yeah. So, just imagine 3 13Ks plus, you know, one time there's actually both of these on the rear guard circles. So, you know, plus an additional 26 and, yeah, just numbers. That's all I really need to say. So, yeah, that thing makes numbers. It inherently gets more numbers than the other two hands down alone. And then, if you boost it with 3 or more times, so just doing the regular, like doing the bare minimum that the other two do, which is boosting 3 or more times, is enough. But anyways, you can counterblast 1 to choose any 3 of your units and stand them, and they all get plus 5k and lose a drive until end of turn. So, here's the important part about this. Any 3 units can stand, including itself. Granted, it makes them lose power, but they keep they do get at least a little bit of power, like they would exactly 5k, like they would from geometry markers that came from her, but also they can multi-attack like her, but they get a lot bigger fucking numbers like this one. And they also get boosted because you swing with the rear guards first. I like how the vase is like legitimate combination of Leonor Masquez skill and Grand March of Full Bloom Lianorn skill with both the restanding and the numbers. It's beautiful. Yeah, no, numbers at the wazoo. The second attack of this thing and the last like 3 attacks in general of the turn might be your weakest attacks, but yeah, your opponent's gonna throw down a lot of cards this turn, or at least a PG on the really big one. Full Breveche. It's just good. You don't even need a counterblast for the full boost. You use the counterblast to restand, so cool. And then we have a last card in the deck, one of in the ride deck, none in the main deck, of Grand March of Full Bloom Lianorn. You see, comparatively, she's worse than these two just because of what they do. Anyways, but she's still solid. Grade 3 to 9% 13k base, active Vanguard Circle once per turn. By counterblasting 1, you get to draw a card, then choose a card from your hand and call it to Rear Guard Circle or discard it. And then Auto Vanguard, when she attacks into anyone by Soul Blasting 1 and discarding 1, boost with your entire back row standing that has boost. And then if you boosted this unit with 3 or more units, it gets plus 1 drive for that battle. And at the end of that battle, choose 2 of your back or rear guard and stand them. So, oh yeah, the one other thing that she's similar to in terms of this one with skills is that she technically has triple drive because she has 10 drive inherently, then she stands and then she'll attack 1 more time, which will have triple drive then, or the last attack will have 1 drive, which in total adds triple drive. But anyways, you know, basically being triple drive is nice because this doesn't cost any CB for. Granted, it costs a hand card, which is kind of iffy sometimes, especially if you're early game rushing like I do, but it tends to help get resource back, like draws, heals. I remember there was one game where I sacked double crits into a heal, which was just nice. But yeah, all around pretty solid. She hits numbers, she has pressure to it, she does have triple drive, and she can stand back row, meaning unlike these two, she doesn't get multi-attack, she at least gets bigger numbers. So she's nice to go, like, going first with, because it at least helps set up for later in the game. So one of Grand March of Full Bloom Lianorn in the ride deck. She may not get multi-attack, which depending on her situation you may want, but she definitely gets good numbers, and she at least allows you to set up for later game by getting that triple drive. So one of in the ride deck. You don't really want any of the main deck because you want to focus on these two. Then we have technically our last card, but it's not the card in the deck, it's just a card next to the deck, and that is the Draco Tree marker. You only need 5. You're never going to hit 5. If you do, then I question how, because you would have had to use so much of your CB, and you would have to see a heal every single time. But, I mean, it is what it is. Anyways, during your turn, if you have Vanguard, Draco Tree, or Masquez's card name, all units on this circle get plus 5,000 power. So, cool. When you spam down your Depth Elves while you're on Leonor Masquez only, they'll always be plus 5s. But, I mean, that's pretty much their only calling factor, and it's just for the multi-attack. So, yeah, 5. You don't really need 5, but you might need it one day. Who knows? And without further ado, that's it for the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed. Aura on this deck is very fun to play. You have options to go into any of the Leonorns. You have big beat stick over here. We have multi-attack beat stick over here. And then we have bigger beat stick with more multi-attack beat stick over here. We have grade 1 rush galore with Perette spam in literally every single grade 1 in this deck, including PG's worst case scenarios. And like, it just works consistently even though you would think it wouldn't. So without further ado, guys, one here. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, join us on Twitch, and I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to send up your Vanguards.